do that? How did you do that?
Welcome back everyone to another ESO build video. Today I'm going to be giving you the update to the Easy Sorc, or previously known as the Easy Mode Sorcerer. Now this is just as strong, if not stronger, in this particular update. This is for Murkmire, regardless of all the crying and screaming and tantrums of the children on the forums. Do not worry, sorcerers are not dead. Now, first of all, I'm going to go over the stats, which is obviously the most important part to start with. This will look a little weird because some of the stats don't actually show, but I'll explain that as I go. First of all, 42.9k max Magicka, 858 Magicka recovery, which will go up if you use a potion, 2.7k spell damage, which will go up with our weapon glyph, and also 55.6% crit chance. Our resist is sit on 18 and 16k across the board, which is very, very nice. In fact, a little bit tankier than most stamina setups. 64 points into max Magicka, and we're using a Thief Mundus Stone with max health, max magic food, the blue stuff, and we are a stage 4 vampire. Deliberately, because we want those bonuses. Now, if you're worried about being a vampire, most people will tell you, oh, don't be a vampire because if you stand in fire, you'll die. Actually, if you stand in fire, you'll die anyway, because most things in the game that do fire damage will pretty much one-shot you. So just get used to the mechanics, watch your feet, and you'll be fine. Every single bit of content that I've been in that has fire in it, as a stage 4 vampire, I don't struggle any more than anybody else. It's just fine. It's all about your feet. Now, I said the spell damage goes up. It does. We won't overcomplicate that for now, but it's 2.7 there. If we prop the glyph, it's actually 3,182. So we're over 3k, which is nice. Now, the stats are balanced on purpose because of the type of damage that we do, but that will make more sense once we get to the rotation. First of all, I'm going to go over the skills. As far as the overall setup is concerned, if you are familiar with these skills anyway and you already know everything and you don't need to be told anything else, of course you can skip this part, but that is at your own risk. I will show you tips and tricks and hints and that kind of stuff, so if you miss out on them, don't be surprised when you don't get a response in the comment section for asking something that was already answered in the video. Anyway, that's your choice, but we're going to go over them anyway, especially for those of you that aren't familiar with the skills. First of all, Inner Light. This comes from the Mage's Guild skill line. You need Mage's Guild 2 for this, by the way. Mage's Guild is acquired via lore books discovery and stuff like that. There's a couple of little quests and stuff you can do as well. They don't contribute that much, but overall you need to hunt lore books. Now, the first paragraph is irrelevant. We're not using it for that purpose. We're using it for the second paragraph. And I read this very carefully. While slotted, while it's on your bar, your max Magicka is increased by 5%. So your overall pool is 5% more. Now, also, we get Major Prophecy. That is a buff type. So if you have another version of it from somewhere else, from a potion or from somebody else giving it to you, which I don't think you can, they do not stack. It's the same thing. The same buffs do not stack. Minor and Major do. Major and Major, or Minor and Minor, do not. So just clear that one up straight away. Increasing your spell crit rating by 2191. I don't know why Zos still choose to use digits, but that basically is 10%. So for those of you that are confused, Major Prophecy is 10% increase to your crit chance. That's your chance to crit, not your damage. Now, of course, that's very important to have a whole time. So we want to make sure this is on our front bar so we don't lose it. Again, first ability in Mage's Guild, you get it at level 2 on the Mage's Guild. Second ability is from the Destruction Staff skill line. Now, we're currently using Crushing Shock. This does 3 different hits all at once. I'll just demonstrate that so you can see what it does. There you go, 3 hits. Each one can individually crit or not crit as well, and each one is a different element. One of them is lightning, one of them is frost, and one of them is flame. Now, we use this most of the time because this can actually interrupt casting targets from very, very long range. In fact, 28 meters unless you're using Propelling Shield. It's very, very nice indeed. And if you do interrupt them, you will knock them off balance and stun them, which is really, really, really important to this overall setup. So, in content that you need to interrupt stuff, and you'll know this based on your experience and what your raid leaders or dungeon group leaders or whatever are telling you, you'll get used to it. This is very, very, very strong as a weave inside your rotations and as a passive kind of usage to interrupt stuff by default, or you can use it as and when you need to. But the rest of the time, if you're single target and you're not worried about interrupts, you want to use Destructive Clench. Now, where these come from, both of them are from a Destruction Staff skill line. Crushing Shock was Force Shock to start with. Make sure it's Crushing because that's the one we interrupt. Failing that, the rest of the time, if you want a little bit more damage for single target up front, Destructive Clench starts off as Destructive Touch. Morph that to Destructive Clench. It will be called Shock Clench because you're using a lightning staff. And this will actually do a single target damage over time to the target you are hitting. Every time you refire it, it will do a single target hit as well with a little bit of splash damage. And just to demonstrate that, basically it looks like this. As you saw then, both targets got hit, but he is the one with the damage over time on him. So every time you apply it, it reapplies that dot. So it does do more damage than Crushing Shock overall by a small amount inside the rotation that we have, which I will get to. But for most content, you may want to use Crushing Shock because there's a lot of situations where you'll have to interrupt. This can do it by default in your rotation, or you can apply it, like I said, as and when. And especially in Maelstrom as well, if you're going into VMA, take this skill. Now, the next skill is Hardened Ward. Now, this is what the forums are crying about. This is the 4th ability you unlock in the Daedric Summoning skill line. While leveling, as a new sorcerer, you may want to get this Clan Fear pet here. Morph this pet into the Clan Fear, and you can get a 35% of your max health heal as and when you need to, if you activate it. That will help you leveling because you haven't got any other way to survive. But dump it once you get this shield, and this is how you survive from now on. Basically, you activate the shield, and you'll see that there's some purple overlay on my health bar protecting me. Now, where this is from, like I said, is from Daedric Summoning skill line. It's a 4th one you unlock. Starts off as Conjurer's Ward, morph it to Hardened Ward. Now, how this changed, all damage shields changed, but the light armor and the sorcerer ones specifically now have a cap on them. Now, before, the more max magic you had, the larger your shield was. Technically, that's still true. However, you can only go so far with this now. You can only go to 50% of your max health. Now, what that means is, depending on the amount of health you have, depends on how strong your shield is. So as you can see at the moment, I've got an 8.5k shield. Because I have 17k health, it's half of my health at most. If I have 20k, that's a 10k shield. If I have 10k, that's a 5k shield. So what you have in your bar determines how strong this is. So that is now up to you. Instead of saying, oh, I've got 15k health and I have a 23k damage shield, that would be broken, wouldn't it? And it was for quite a while, although the damage shields have changed a bit. Now it is now focused on how much you have available, and it will cover 50% of it. Now, how has this also changed? It looks like you've got half a shield of what you had before, but you technically don't. It's still really, really, really strong because they changed the way that shields are applied in PvE and PvP as well, although we won't go over the PvP sides of it. Basically, instead of receiving an 8,500 damage hit and removing your shield, which is what it used to do because resist didn't count, now the game considers your resistances first. So the amount of mitigation that you have based on your current resistances when you get hit is calculated first before your damage shield. So if I'm going to get hit with 10k, I will lose 8.5k damage shield and I'll get hit for 1.5. So my health will be at risk. I'm going to start taking damage. However, that's the old way. Now, if I have, for argument's sake, 20% mitigation to damage, to the damage that's coming in, and I get hit with 10k, I will mitigate 20% of it. So I will only receive 8k in damage, which means my damage shield hasn't actually fell off yet because I've still got 579 remaining. My health doesn't get hurt. So the shields are very, very strong based on how much you can resist before it gets hit. So they are very, very nice, especially on a bloody tank. Obviously, sorcerers and light armor stuff got reduced, but the resistances still count. On a tank, however, most tanks can hit 50% mitigation cap because they can have 33200 in their resistances. So any damage they take is halved before it even hits their damage shield. It's disgusting. So this new change is actually very, very strong indeed. And of course, since the damage shields are a little bit lower than they were before as a max overall, it gives your healers a little bit of a workout as well. But it still applies, you still insta-cast them, it's absolutely fine. It's really, really powerful. I've done VMA with this version, done it with the old version, and I've also done it with a 1 second cast time on PTS when they introduced that as a possible change, and it was still just fine. People are crying about nothing. It takes a little bit of adapting to because it's not what you're used to seeing, but it's very, very nice indeed. Don't forget, of course, all the other damage shields that you get from other people, whether it be from maybe Combat Physician or Bastion or Igneous Shields or Bone Shields or anything like that. Any damage shield that you receive, do stack with these. So you can stack up lots and lots of shields and have loads and loads of resists and barely lose your shields at all. They are much, much more efficient than people thought they would be. So, stop crying. That's your oh shit button. Bound Aegis, next. Now, this is in the Daedric Summoning skill line also, and it's the last one you unlock. So after you've got your shield, you start pushing towards this. Starts off as Bound Armor, morph it to Bound Aegis. Now, this is a confusing skill for most because they don't read it. However, what this does is while it's on your bar, you receive an increased maximum Magicka amount of your bar, your overall Magicka, permanently, while it's on your bar. You also gain Minor Ward and Minor Resolve, increasing your physical and spell resistance by 1320. That, by the way, is on both bars. So if we swap bars, we have it no matter what. Before, you used to toggle it before Somerset. Now you don't. You just have it there and it does its job. The confusing part is the first paragraph here. Protect yourself with the power of Oblivion, creating a suit of Daedric Mail that increases your block mitigation by 36% for 3 seconds. People thought that the underlined stuff here at the bottom on the second paragraph meant you have to activate it and it only lasts 3 seconds. You have max magic and minor resolve and ward all the time. The activation of this, however, you can see here, 3, 2, 1, gone. That is your block mitigation. So if you are blocking and you activate it, you mitigate a further 36% towards your block mitigation overall. So basically, activate this while you're blocking, and you will take a lot less damage from the incoming hit that you're about to receive. And if you want to boost that furthermore, put on your damage shield, put on the block resistance as well. When it hits your shield, then it will hit your health afterwards, and then you'll continue from there. Just note, by the way, block mitigation is not considered towards your damage shield strength. Your resistance is, your block isn't. But it can strip your shield first, then hit your health bar with your block mitigation, and then that's when you're really, really strong. So stack them together if you can, but watch your sustain because it does cost a bit. Now, like I said, we double bar that. The last one is Mage's Wrath. This is in Storm Calling. This is the first ability to actually unlock in this tree, so it's really easy to get. Mage's Fury it starts with, morph it to Mage's Wrath, and what this will do is this will actually hit the target for a very small amount of damage when it lands, and it will splash and hit the other targets as well. But, 1, it will only splash when the targets are below 20%, and 2, don't use it above 20% because it's an execute. Now, if you look very carefully at the skill, you will see that it does X amount of shock damage under 20% health of the target, and does the splash to nearby enemies. However, it lasts 4 seconds. It doesn't mean you hit it and it does it for 4 seconds. It means, while that timer is running, if he's above 20%, if he goes under 20% during that timer, it will pop. And then obviously under then you can just keep firing and firing and firing. It's your execute anyway. It will do shit tons of damage to enemies under 20%, but you can preempt it with a 4-second timer if you can anticipate that that's going to go below 20 before that explodes. Really handy in PvP, by the way. If you know someone's going to go low health, quickly pop that on and give them some shit, and then they just explode. Really, really handy. Now, the first ultimate on the front bar is Ice Comet. This is from the Mages Guild skill line. I can hear you screaming, I don't want to go lore book farming. Don't worry, there is an alternative. But you want this on your bar for the passives, which I will come to after all the skills are over. Now, we don't use this that much. It is not our main ultimate. If you miss crit, you basically fired a blank. It's useless. So make sure that you've got plenty of crit in your build if you are ever using this particular skill. It's not very effective on this particular one, but it is good for a finisher if you don't have enough ultimate to fire your backbarred Destruction Staff ultimate. We primarily use our Destro ulti all the time. You never ever fire this unless the target's nearly dead. So if you are practicing on target dummy and you want to go through your rotations and you're about to finish it and this is up and the other one isn't, sure, you can fire it. If you're on a boss and it's really, really low health, you haven't got enough of the Destro ulti, but you think it's about to die and you've got an Ice Comet, sure, fire it. If you haven't and you're not in that situation, leave it where it is. It's a passive bonus, which we'll come to. However, another option, also for a different passive bonus, which is very, very similar, you can use Suppression Field instead if you don't have Mage's Guild level 10. And this will actually put a big negate bubble down on the ground. It's absolutely massive. For 12 seconds, everyone caught inside of it, if they can be stunned or CC'd, will be stunned. They'll sit on the ground, they can't do anything, and they take damage every half a second for 12 seconds. It's really, really strong. Also, inside some mechanics, this is actually very, very beneficial, especially inside some of the newer dungeons. So, your front bar ultimate, you can use Suppression Field or Ice Comet, depending on what you've got access to. Ice Comet is very slightly more damage overall for the build, as far as the passives are concerned, but Suppression Field will still contribute towards it as well, for it being a sorcerer ability, and I will get to those passives soon. But again, this is not your main ultimate of use, this is your oh shit button. Now, back bar. We already said we're Baron Aegis on both bars, so that one's covered. Blockade of Storms, this is very simple. Destruction Staff skill line, if I can actually find it. Where's it gone? Second ability to unlock in the Destruction Staff skill line is called Wall of Elements at first, which is why I call it Wall of Elements all the time, Force of Habit, but it gets morphed into Elemental Blockade. Now this will put down a damage over time effect on the floor for 8 seconds in front of you, and any enemy caught inside of it will take damage every 1 second. Now depending on what staves you're using, depends on what morphs or what names these Destruction Staff abilities turn into. So this is called Elemental Blockade, but if you look on your tooltip, it actually says Blockade of Storms. The reason is because we're using a Shock Staff. Now this will do lightning damage every 1 second. And lightning damage has a chance to concuss the enemy. Concussion is a status effect that applies a very, very small amount of damage, but it applies a minor vulnerability debuff to the targets caught by it, meaning the targets themselves will take 8% extra damage if that applies. Also, while this is down, if they are concussed, this particular morph, or this particular skill rather, with a lightning staff will also cause them to go off balance for 5 seconds. Now, knocking the target off balance will actually make it vulnerable, if you like, because the damage you do to it from a heavy attack is increased by 70%. Also, the return you get from a fully charged heavy attack is doubled. So that's very, very good for your sustain. It's also very good for your damage if you're utilizing heavy attacks, which we are. Now, the timer for off balance is 5 seconds. The cooldown, or the immunity of the target, is 15 seconds. Not every single target is immune for 15. Some of them you can reapply it instantly, like trash and stuff like that in some situations. But all bosses have a 15-second cooldown or immunity to it. So every 20 seconds, you have a 25% uptime on off balance if you can constantly apply concussion. That's very, very important to the build, and that is why we're using as much lightning as possible, because we are all about lightning, area of effect, heavy attack damage, and off-balance bonuses for ourselves and other people. So bear that in mind. It's really, really important. Concussion first, off-balance second, and all applied by this skill. As you can see, instant off-balance. Now, the next one is Boundless Storms. This is very, very important, by the way. This is in the Storm Calling skill line. Now, this ability is the second one you unlock. You get it very early in the game, and you morph it from Lightning form to Boundless Storms. And this will do damage to nearby targets once a second for 23 seconds, and increase your movement speed for 4 seconds, and give you Major Resolve and Major Ward. Now, Major Ward and Major Resolve will give you 5280 spell and physical resistance, as well as, remember, we have minor physical and spell resistant bonus from our Bound Aegis. So we've got really, really nice tanky resistances, especially for a squishy Lightwear and Sorcerer. Now, why is this ability important? Not just for those bonuses, but if you stay really close to the targets, which we intend to do with this setup, we can stay in the face of them. We've got more resistance and more sustained survivability than most staminas. We can stay close. They're both getting zapped constantly. You can see they've both got zap, 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 zap. That is important. I'm going to get to the next skill, and you're going to find out why. The next skill is Power Surge, also from the same skill line, but every time you crit something, once a second, you will heal from this ability. It will give us Major Sorcery as well. Obviously, 20% increase to our spell damage. So, you know those spell pots out there that everyone likes to use? Well, this is already applied. So we've got that in our arsenal. But for doing so, every crit once a second will heal us for 2550. That stacks with healing received and healing bonuses and all that kind of stuff as well, including minor, major mending and healing received bonuses from whether it be sets, passives, or other people giving you buffs. And what this does, first of all, it needs to be morphed from Surge to Power Surge. You put your hands together like this, put Boundless on, watch. Every single crit you see once a second, which is happening, will heal me. It's very hard to die. Obviously, we're not getting too many crit. Oh, we got a crit dot then. That will count. See the burning status effect that applied then from Grofdar? Although Grofdar can't crit, the monster set we're using, which I'll get to, the burning status effects can. Any crit will heal me. You put that alongside all of our abilities we're using, we are very, very strong. Our survivability is extremely high. Now, Liquid Lightning, Storm Calling, third ability you unlock. This does start off as Liquid Splash, turn it into Liquid Lightning specifically, and this is a 10-second damage over time ability on the ground, which does shock damage once a second. Very similar to that of Wall of Elements in terms of its damage output, but it's in a circle rather than a straight line like Wall of Elements is. So Wall of Elements goes all the way to here, Liquid Lightning needs to be placed. But Liquid Lightning lasts 10 seconds, Wall of Elements lasts 8, so always fire, Wall of Elements last. It's got the shorter duration. You want to make sure they both run out roughly the same time. High duration first, low duration last. Very, very important. And of course, if anybody stands anywhere near it, they can synergize it and do a nice area of effect shock blast, which really, really hurts. So any of your DPS or anyone that picks this up will do extra damage. It's really, really handy. Keep this up and keep this up and keep your two buffs up all the time. Your back bar is your main duration bar. So dot, one of your buffs, and then you dot again, and then you'll do all your front bar stuff, which I will get to in the rotation, do not panic. Thunderous Rage, of course, is our ultimate on our back bar. This is what you want to use 100% of the time, unless the situation arises where the boss is really, really low and you've got not enough ultimate to fire it, but you have enough for the front one. That's different. But the rest of the time, always use this. It starts off as Elemental Storm. Morph it to Elemental Rage, and you'll be able to place this yourself. If you morph it to the other one, it does less damage, and it sticks to you, which is a bit useless for us because that's not how we're designed. Now, obviously, this is called Thunderous Rage because we're using our lightning stuff, but the Elemental Rage is the actual base for the skill. With it being lightning damage, we gain an extra 2 seconds from it, which means it lasts 9 seconds, not 7. And this can also concuss the enemy as well, just like every other lightning ability can, meaning it pushes our off balance while inside the wall of elements. It's very, very strong. I don't know if I've got enough ultis to fire it. There you go. Lots of lightning. Everything inside there gets absolutely wrecked. Keep your wall of elements down and it's all dead. Very, very nice ability. That is your main ultimate. Now, we're going to get into passives. Dark Magic, we're not really using any apart from Suppression Field if you don't have Mage's Guild or in situations that you need a Negate Bubble. Your raid leaders will tell you about that. Now, you will need these passives. Reduce the Magicka and stamina cost of all abilities by 5%. Of course, we want a reduction to cost. This is not really relevant because we're not really using Dark Magic, but it will fire if you're using the Negate Bubble, so you can get it if you want. After blocking an attack, your next magical or stamina ability costs 15% less. That is very, very important. And of course, if you are using Bound Aegis and you have to use it a couple of times in a row, the first block that you successfully kind of achieve, your next cast is cheaper, or your next shield, or your next any ability. Doesn't matter. This is important. And of course, this one here, when you cast a Dark Magic ability, you grant Minor Prophecy to you and your group, increasing your spell crit chance and theirs by 1320, which is about 6%, because they changed it recently, for 20 seconds. We're not really using any Dark Magic abilities, but you can get the passive if you intend on using any later, but for now, we don't really need it, and especially since this isn't spammed. It's not that important. Daedric Summoning. This is for pets, we don't use it. This is for pets, we don't use it. These two, we do. Reduces the cost of your ultimates by 15%. Very, very important. Get that as soon as possible. And this one as well increases your health recovery, which is a bit meh because we're a vampire. But the stamina recovery is very, very nice, especially since we are going to need to block and dodge roll and break free and stuff like that anyway. So having one Daedric Summoning ability slotted grants you this passive. And we've got Bound Aegis, as you can see, on both bars, which does come from this skill line. So we are covered. We've got it on both bars. Storm Calling. These are essential. Increases your magic recovery by 10%. Perfect. We need the recovery and sustain. Increases your physical and shock damage by 5%. This means that all of our damage that we passively do, mostly lightning, is boosted to hell. Obviously, our monster helmet and elements of our crush and shock, if you're using that particular skill or you're not using destructive clench, isn't shock, but everything else is. It's very, very important you get this passive. And implosion, of course, if you do any lightning damage or physical, we're not doing any physical, however, unless you count a bash, any lightning damage to any target under 15% health at any time has a 6% chance to basically explode. It says here 11k shock damage. That's a lot more. That passive with all your buffs and bonuses, especially once everything's applied, especially in a trial and dungeon situation, can go way into the high 20s. That's free damage 6% of the time from everything you do. It's disgusting. Get that passive as soon as possible. Also increases your weapon and spell damage by 2% for each sorcerer ability slotted. This is why Negate Bubble is a possibility. Now, this is one sorcerer ability, this is 2, this is 3, 2% for each one, there's your 6. This, however, if you don't have Mage's Guild, your option to put Negate Bubble on there, not just for utility, but also for that extra 2%. Because if you look here, now we have 8 on the front bar, not 6. So our spell damage is slightly improved by having this ultimate on here. However, Mage's Guild will give you something else. So Mage's Guild is slightly stronger based on the way that our damage is applied, but the spell damage is nice anyway. If you have Mage's Guild 10 and you do have access to Ice Comet, you will benefit from this passive here, which will increase your maximum Magicka and your Magicka recovery for each skill slotted from this skill line. This here gives us a 5% flat bonus anyway, but we also get the additional 2, and this will give us the additional 2. Boosting our Magicka over by that amount does overall improve the performance of this particular build, but it's very, very close, and if you don't have it, you can put on Suppression Field instead. The choice is yours. 2% spell damage or 2% Magicka damage for each ability. So you get a 4% across the board for having Mage's 10 with that passive, or you won't get the 4%, you'll just get a 2% increased spell damage instead. It's a bit of a scales game. It's entirely up to you which one you have. Now, light armor. Get every single one of these. You are going to need them all. Some of them got changed recently, but basically every single one of these are for you to get. These first 3 are based on how many pieces of light you wear. We're wearing 5, so the more you wear, the more this is beneficial to you. These 2 require 5 pieces. Now, You can go through them in full detail in your own time if you want, but basically this reduces the effectiveness of snares and your sprint cost. This will give you extra recovery and reduce the cost of your abilities. This will give you a small spell resist bonus for each piece worn. This here will give you an increased crit rating of 10%, so you have a higher crit chance for wearing 5 pieces of light. And this here will give you a flat bonus to spell penetration. Now, in PvE, targets generally have 18,200 resistance for both physical and spell. You just went through 4,884 before you even started. So they're now down to 14k almost already. Nearly 13. So this is very, very strong indeed. This is a base passive for light armor that you really need to have. So don't forget it. Medium armor, we're not too worried about these. The ones that you really want to concern yourself with, because we're using one piece of medium, is this one here, Windwalker, so you get a stam recovery bonus, and also athletics, so your dodge roll is cheaper as well. The more pieces you wear, the more beneficial these are, but obviously we don't want to wear too many mediums because it's going to negate our point of having 5 pieces of light, and it's going to affect our overall performance, so you don't want to do that. One piece is just fine, so get these 2 passives here if you have the spare points. The rest are irrelevant. Now this one here, small resistance to physical and spell if you have 1 piece of heavy armor. Also, health recovery, which is meh, but you also get 108 stamina and magic back once every 4 seconds if you take damage. It's small, but it does contribute. And of course, Juggernaut will give you a 2% increase to your max health for each piece of heavy armor worn. We are wearing 1, remember, so this does help us. Now, Vampire is very, very important. 10% recovery across the board for Magicka and stamina, insane. And also Undeaf. The lower your health goes, the less damage you take. So if you go under 50% health and start dipping and dipping and dipping, you can get up to 33% reduction to incoming damage. So the amount of damage you can actually take when you're really low is really, really high. I've seen so many times where I've hit 1% health and it's because of this passive and still survived. Give your healers a break, get this passive, it's so bloody strong. You don't have to be a vampire if you don't want to, but I would highly recommend it. Now, Fighters Guild, you are going to need this. This will generate 9 ultimate every time you kill an undead Daedra or werewolf. That's very important. We're going to kill lots of those, so if you get the kill and blow, there's your extra ultimate, then you can use your Destro ulti more often. Mage's Guild have already been over, you just need the 1 passive there. The rest aren't that important, just the one that gives you recovery and extra Magicka. Undaunted is essential. Synergies! You take a synergy, whatever it does. So if you hit a Nova, you'll do loads of damage and knock people down. If you hit a Liquid Lightning, you'll do splash damage in the form of lightning around you. If you pick up a spear, you'll get magic or stamina back, depending on which pool is highest. Lots and lots of different synergies in the game that are all, believe it or not, beneficial. Every single one you pick up is beneficial for you and or somebody else. So pick them up. Not only that, if you have this passive, you will gain 4% of your max resources back in every single bar. Health, magic, and stamina. Stop listening to the crybaby tanks that keep telling you that the synergies are theirs. They're not their synergies. Everyone can pick up synergies and everybody should pick up synergies. If they want another spear, they can ask for it. This is very, very strong. Now, increase your max health, stamina, and max magicka by 2% for each type of armor worn. Remember, we are wearing 3 different types. 1 piece of heavy, that's 1 type, 1 piece of medium, that's 2 types, and 5 pieces of light, that's 3 types. That will give us a total of 6% across the board to magic, stamina, and health. It's very, very helpful indeed. Support. Siege Shield or Purge, you may want these in certain content. Your raid leaders, I'm sure, will tell you why. But if you can unlock these, that is a benefit to you. But they're not essential for the overall build at this point in time. And, of course, we are a high elf, which means we get 9% recovery, 10% maximum magicka, and we also do more damage with Flame, Frost, and Shock by 4%. We have a 5% shock bonus in the Sorc passives, and we have a 4% shock bonus in the high elf passive. So we have a really big bonus to shock damage, hence why we're doing so much of it. Finally, one of the most important passives in my opinion, although for this particular build it's not that much use, I guess. I mean, it is in certain content, depends on how much you use potions. If you use potions all the time and you're constantly running tripods because you want to keep all your health, your stam, and your magic up because you like using them, be my guest. It's entirely up to you. And getting medicinal use will give you a 47-second uptime on the potions when the cooldown is 45. So basically you can have the recovery all the time as long as you constantly pop a potion. But generally with this build, because you've got Major Sorcery already, you've got Major Prophecy already, you can pretty much get away with trash pots. In fact, a lot of content I use this for, because the recovery is so high and because all of our sustain is covered with our heavy attacks, especially the off-balance ones, a lot of the time I use stand pots. So if you're feeling a little bit shiny and want to use tripods all the time, sure, get this passive. But anyway, above all, for other builds, you can use it on this one if you want. This is one of the most important passive in the game, in my opinion, for most content, because it allows you to have 100% uptime on crafted pots depending on the bonuses they have. So there is a link in the description for this, for the alchemy guides. I will basically explain how to get this done and max within 15 minutes as long as you've got the materials, which I also explain are very easy to get for this particular guide. Max this to full, dump the skill points, get medicinal use, never look back. Really, really handy in all content, although I will admit this particular build doesn't necessarily require it. We're done there. So, gear. Now, this is where people start screaming and going, oh my god, it's not fair, RNGesus is not with me. I can't do anything about that, I'm afraid, but I am doing this on the live, so I've also already done it. One of the things you'll notice about my build videos is although I spend weeks and weeks on PTS behind the scenes, I actually present them on live. So I've already done all the farming, I've already done all the leveling of the skills, so I've already been there first, so don't worry, I understand your frustration. But, we're going to go over this. If you don't do trials, first of all, here's a tip. Any trials gear can be got on normal. So look for those pickup groups that go around in local Gratwood or Craglawn or whatever. Raise your hand, get stuck in after 160 CP, so then you can pick up gear that you won't out-level. There's no fear in it, just get in and get it done. However, if you don't want to do that, I do have an alternative set for you, and it's very, very strong. And also a bit of a curveball, because most people haven't even considered this. But we'll get to it. First of all, Undaunted Infiltrator. Sharpened, yes, it's on purpose. No, I'm not a moron. Sharpened on purpose with an increased weapon and spell damage glyph on the front bar. This is a lightning staff, by the way. And as to Somerset's changes, lightning staves, flame staves, any two-handed weapons, any bows, every single one of them count as 2 pieces of your set. So out of 5 pieces, this counts as 2. Now, this set is technically a medium set. But because Somerset introduced jewelry crafting, and they introduced two-handers being 2 pieces, we can actually use 3 pieces of jewelry and 1 staff, and that counts as 5 pieces. We can change the jewelry traits from robust, because it's a medium set, to 1 bloodthirsty and 2 infused, and this is now effectively a light set. Why is that a benefit? Because the stats that we get from it. Maximum magic, which increases our pool. Maximum magic again. Weapon crit chance, which is irrelevant. That is the one bonus on there that we don't use, so just ignore that, scrub it out completely. Max magic, max magic. The last one is the most important. When you use a Magicka ability, or anything that costs Magicka, your light attacks and your heavy attacks will deal additional damage, which does stack with other bonuses, which I'm going to get to, including off balance, for 10 seconds. Now look at my buff timers at the bottom there. I'll activate shield, and you can see that little helmet symbol there. Look at the countdown. Swap bars, swap bars. It's with me the whole time. My arms are glowing, the buff is on. As long as your arms are glowing, it's active. So if you're on the back bar, you get the bonus. If you're on the front bar, you get the bonus. All you have to do is make sure that you fire 1 magic ability on your front bar once every 10 seconds, which we do. We actually fire 2 every 10 seconds on our front bar, which, unless we use a shield occasionally as well, which will give us 100% uptime and more on that ability. You will never, ever lose it as long as you stick to your rotation. So, lightning staff on the front, and then the 3 jewelry as well. Spell damage on all of them, infuse, infuse, and bloodthirsty. Bear in mind, of course, especially on the past I show you as well, bloodthirsty is one of those that, obviously, if you improve your jewelry, it gets stronger by 1%. So this could be 10% increased damage at execute, but for now it's 9. You don't have to gold your jewelry, but if you do, you will benefit from that. The other set to go alongside of it is Infallible Ether. Now we use infused on the big pieces. This is all on the body, by the way, so you don't have to get jewelry or weapons. Divines on the feet, divines on the hands, divines on the waist, infused on the legs, and infused on the chest. Now this doesn't have to be perfect. You don't have to have all the perfect traits. You can change traits later. Just get the pieces and slap them on. But there's a lot of noise about this set because people seem to think that it's a healer set. Can you utilize it with a heavy attack on a healer? Yes, of course you can, but you can do that with anything. You can do it with a tank, you can do it with a DPS, you can do it with anything. But this particular build benefits heavily from the 5-piece bonus, and I'm going to explain why. Spell crit, first of all, we want crit chance because we want to make sure those heavy attacks do get the bonuses when they go off balance because they're a massive, massive, massive stack and bonus, and that crit really helps. Minor Slayer, increase 5% damage across the board for dungeons, trials, and arenas. Also spell damage, which does increase our damage, of course, and spell crit again. Notice the 5-piece bonus, first of all, is spell crit. So that's one bonus. The second bonus, which people overlook, is the 903 extra damage to heavy attacks. I'm going to explain that in a moment. The third one is when you deal damage with a fully charged heavy attack, you are basically affecting the target with minor vulnerability, which we do or don't have occasionally with lightning anyway, which increases the damage to the target done by 8%. Do these stack? No, they do not. Can you have the uptime on multiple targets? Yes, you can. Is it important that one person has this and everybody else doesn't? No. You don't need to have just one person using this if you're using 2 easy sorcs, for example, because the one that is overlooked is the second bonus. We'll go over it again. Ignore the minor vulnerability bonus. This pink stuff here. See that? That's what everyone cries about. Oh, you don't need more of those. I'm not looking at that. That's not what we're using the set. Don't care about that bonus. What we care about is your fully charged heavy attacks deal an additional 903 damage. So, if you do a fully charged heavy attack, there's a pop at the end. Okay, that was 7k with no buffs, nothing whatsoever. That is what that bonus contributes towards. Now we're going to go over another bonus from another set. We are, of course, using the Maelstrom weapon. If you don't have it, don't panic. Put willpower on the back bar for now. You'll be just fine. But the Maelstrom weapon, especially if you infuse it as well, will give you increased light and heavy attacks to anything inside of your wall of elements. So if you put your wall of elements down and swap bars, doesn't matter. The buff is down now. Anything in here that takes one of these or one of these does more damage to your lights and heavies. Undaunted Infiltrator, by default, is doing extra damage to our light and heavies. And yes, this stacks with the Maelstrom bonus. When the target goes off balance, your light attacks and your heavy attacks will do more damage. Your heavy attack especially, sorry. Your heavy attack will do 70% more damage, which also stacks with the Maelstrom weapon and stacks with Undaunted Infiltrator. Now that heavy attack bonus that we're stacking already is really, really high. But if you add the 903 to this, this also stacks with all those bonuses. And that 903 calculates up a lot. It's really, really high. If you're on PC and you've got access to combat metrics, what you're looking for is Shock Pulse. You stack all these bonuses together, that Shock Pulse will go anywhere in excess of 27 to 30 odd, depending on what buffs you've got, every time that last tick pops at the end. You saw a 7k, that was a 12 without any additional buffs. So we'll put this on. We'll make sure we've got Undaunted Infiltrator. We won't put any debuffs on the target, but we've got an off-balance heavy attack there. The pop at the end was 23.8. You just saw there. You can rewind it if you want. That was a 23k hit. That was without major breach, and it is all because of the stack and bonuses plus that tiny little 903 there. That tiny little bonus is heavily, heavily overlooked on Ether, and all the crybabies that keep saying you don't need the 5th piece have completely missed that part. It's very, very strong indeed. However, there is another option. You do not have to have Infallible Ether if you don't want to. You can have Sorcerer if you want, but most people can't use it because they run in and out of the circle and lose the buff. So most of the time their damage is dropped. But you can use it if you want. But it doesn't necessarily do more damage than this. Out of all the tests, once in a blue moon, it kind of meets in the middle or goes slightly over, but the rest of the time Ether is very, very consistent. It's really, really high. Now, you can use a crafted set. I know most people want to shout elegant just because we're using 2 heavy attacks. Genius, by the way, well done. I'm sure I couldn't have thought of that myself. We have tried it. It was shit. Julianus was used in the past, but it is about 6 or 7k DPS less because it's just some flat extra spell damage. That's it. If you put on Turok's Pact instead, if you want a crafted set, if you can't get Ether, or even if you prefer it, Turok's Pact is a 3-trait crafted set. Put it in all light for all the slots here. Make sure you put the right traits in, which is very easy because you can craft them. And what you will get is you will get spell damage and you will get a resistance bonus. So it sounds like it's half tanky, half damagey. But the 5th piece bonus will actually improve or speed up the cooldown on your glyphs and increase their strength. This sharpened weapon on the front bar, the glyph will then effectively be as though it is infused. You can have almost 100% uptime on it based on the time of your rotation on the front bar. This will go up in strength and will proc a lot more often. And the back bar one, which is infused with a shock glyph, the shock glyph will be improved in strength by it will be over 5k, and also the cooldown will be affected as well. So instead of firing as it does now with infused, like every couple seconds, it fires a lot faster. Which means although you've lost a couple of crit bonuses, you have gained much more damage from your glyph and much more flat damage from this, which actually balances out to be only 1k DPS overall on a solid rotation than Ether. So if you don't do trials or don't even intend to, put Turok's Pact on and it is solid. On average, I can hit 39k on single target with this overall setup and Turok's instead of Infallible Ether. It's very, very nice indeed. However, you're going to need a lot of soul gems because you're going to run out of juice really quick. Now, the rotation. This is very important. The rotation... Oh, we forgot. 1 second. Groftar. Helmet, shoulders. 1 heavy, 1 medium. In any order. As long as you've got Magicka glyphs on them, shoulders divines, helmet is infused, you're good to go. we can stay in the face of the enemy because we have high resist, we have our damage shields, we have damage that heals us and all that good stuff, and you need to stay obviously within close range to make this work. Now, let's look for the fire. Where is it? Come on. See that? You see the circle, the edge of it? This is bad. This is good. Stay in the ring. That way you'll take advantage of it. You do have some options, however, if you prefer. You can use Vulcan Scoria if you are intending on staying range. That will have less Magicka, it will have more health, it will proc every 5 seconds. It's really, really nice if you want to. Slightly less damage, but you can use it if you want. And of course, yes, I can hear people screaming Xan. If you want to use Xan, yes, you can. But consider this. First of all, the heavy attacks. Every single tick, which is like 0.4 of a second or so, maybe a bit higher, has a chance to proc Xan. So it does proc a hell of a lot. And 3 million dummies, on average, most people get it to tick 18 times. This will get it to tick over 20, which is quite nice. But, again, bear in mind that is single target. So only this dude will get hit. Everything else we're doing will actually push both targets. Groff Dart will do both. It's really, really, really strong. One thing I did forget to mention in the skills, of course, is that the destruction passive, which I've kind of glanced over. Where are we? Down here is our shock damage does splash damage to nearby targets, and of course all damage that we do is increased by 8% in area of effect. So this, Grofdar, and your splash from your Mage's Wrath and your Death Royalty. The reason we're using 2 lightning is not just for the overall heavy attacks and the splash and the procs from our own passives as a sorcerer, but also the more AoE we do, the more damage we do to everything else. The single target damage is high, but the AoE damage is disgusting. It's really, really insane. Now, rotation is where I was going to go. So, first of all, we want to put down our Liquid Lightning, fire a light attack, because light attacks are very, very strong. Boundless Storms, light attack again, Wall of Elements, then swap. Really simple. When we come to the back bar again, we'll do the same thing, Liquid Lightning, light attack. Instead of Boundless this time, we use Power Surge. Light attack again, Wall of Elements, swap bars. So every single rotation is Liquid, light attack, a buff, light attack, Wall of Elements, swap. But the buffs alternate. Every 1 rotation you use Boundless Storms, every 2 rotation you use Power Surge. 1 rotation this, 1 rotation that. Not both on the same one. You only activate them both at the beginning of a fight. And make sure your arms are glowing. That's very simple for the back bar. Front bar, once you're there, this is even easier. Heavy attack, crush and shock. Or clench. Heavy attack, crush and shock. Swap bars. Start again. That's it. Now here's a trick. I see a lot of people doing this. Heavy attack, wait, crush and shock. That is far too slow and not the correct way to do it. You can technically, not so much animation cancel, but queue up an ability during a heavy attack. I'm going to hold my heavy attack the entire front bar rotation. There are 2 crush and shocks, or destructive clench, whichever one you're using, in this rotation. So I'm going to hold heavy attack, I'm going to press crush and shock halfway through. You're going to see that button pulsed, so you'll know I've pressed it, and it will fire on its own. So here we go. As soon as I attach my heavy attack to him, I'm going to press it. It's pressed. Now it will fire. Still holding it, press it again. It will fire on itself. Swap bars. Very simple. So just hold heavy attack for 2 crushings. That's all you got to do. The way to swap bars effectively or efficiently is when you hit your last crush and swap. When you hit your last crush and shock, try again. Swap bars as soon as you see it come out of your staff. You see that? You see it goes around in kind of a swipe. That's when you know you've done it correctly, because it'll swing around. If you do this and then swap, that's too slow, but it'll take practice. If you swap as soon as you see it move, that's the way to do it. Same with Wall of Elements. Don't put it down and see this slam and then swap. That's too slow. Press it and swap instantly, and you'll see your staff flip and you're on the front bar as it fires. That's going to take some practice, but that's basically how it works. Now we're going to go in the champion points, then I'm going to show you a very quick skeleton pass on a 3 mil with Major Breach applied to simulate a taunt. I do not need Ellie Drain because obviously our sustain is covered by our heavies. But if you attach this to a target, Elemental Susceptibility, it will apply Major Breach, which is the same as you'll get from a tank taunting. Now, if you do damage to that target since you casted it, it will reapply itself and start the duration again. So you can see it's on him. If I hit him, it's back up to 23 seconds again. Technically 24 because the 0 counts as 1. The whole time I'm doing damage, that will constantly reapply itself. Do it again. And that is how you apply Major Breach to your own target skeleton, so you can practice solo without anybody else interfering and messing with your buffs and debuffs. Anyway, let's go to the champion points. First of all, 72 points into Ironclad, giving us 23% into direct damage reduction. 64 and 64 into Elemental and Hardy, meaning all damage that we take is reduced by 13%. Thick-skinned, all damage over time abilities will be 19% reduced as well, alongside these passives, which of course benefit depending on what type of dot damage it is. 19 points into Quick Recovery, giving us a 5% heal and receive bonus, meaning any heals that we receive from ourselves or other people, including buffs and debuffs and all that kind of stuff, is increased by 5%. And 10 points in his tree will give you Field Physician, giving you a 15% reduction to damage while you are resurrecting someone. So if you resurrect someone, put your Boundless Storms on, make sure Power Surge is on, stand over the body with a shield on and res them. You will do damage to the targets with your Boundless. You will heal from that while you're resing to make sure that obviously you stay alive. Your shield will mitigate damage, and of course you take less damage while doing so. So quickly buff up, pick up a res. You're tanky as fuck. It's really nice. 44 points into Warlord, reducing the cost in stamina for break free. You will need to break free, so put your points into here if you need to. Tenacity, 14% extra return from heavy attacks, which is really, really handy. Don't go anywhere over this, because if you go over 75 points rather, it will take you 25 points to get to 15%, which is a complete waste of points. Also, the same applies here, 14% Magicka recovery across the board as well. Leave these two at 75, don't go any further. 76 points into Tumbling. Technically, you only need 72 in here to get 23%. But I've got 4 points spare. I've got nowhere to put them. So I've put them into here so that I can hit the 75 points in this tree. That will give me the Treasure Hunter passive, which is kind of a quality of life type thing, basically. Every time I loot treasure chests, I get more loot or better loot in terms of quality. So, forgetting my dodge roll bonuses, which I do use, especially in Maelstrom, I kind of got this as well. But you can put more into Warlord if you prefer. But you won't get anything until you hit a flat percentage, and those 4 points won't do anything. Okay, 61 points into Elfborn. We do crit a lot. We've got 55.6% crit chance. We want to make sure those heavy attacks do crit, and when they do, we get the extra damage for it as well, 21% in there. 64 points for all of our elemental and shock and magic and fire damage across the board. 8 points into spell erosion to give us that extra spell pen, just in case all the buffs and that aren't there. Now, yes, we're using Sharpened. Yes, we do have Destro passives, which increase our penetration values. And, of course, you will have buffs and debuffs in dungeons and trials and all that shininess. Now, in an optimized situation, let's say that you have maybe crushers, infused crushers, Alkosh, all those types of things that are applied, you will not necessarily have 100% uptime on those debuffs. It is very, very rare to have 100% uptime on them. So during the gaps, it's nice to have a little bit of overpen just so you can close that and still do your maximum damage. However, this build is very, very, very strong in area of effect. Those area of effect targets, all the ones surrounding, all the adds that have been clustered up on top of the boss, will not have the same debuff as the boss. Alkosh might miss them, might not be up at the moment, might not be on them all the time. The taunt definitely will not be up all the time on all of the adds unless the tank is very, very experienced. And of course, the Crusher will actually be on the main target most of the time, not on the adds. So those adds, if it's an infused Crusher, for example, you are going to have about 2k missing in debuffs for penetration on all of their surrounding targets. Which means if you go slightly over, you are still going to do lots and lots of extra damage to those, whereas before you wouldn't necessarily do that if you hit 18,200 on the nose. So a little bit of overcap is actually not a bad thing with this build because of the contribution to AoE damage that you give. And also on solo as well, this obviously makes it a little bit easier for you to kill stuff. So I would recommend 8 points into there alongside the sharpened weapon, deliberately done of course. But if you find that you are way, way overcapped because your group is very, very, very efficient in certain trials where there's just single target shit, then of course you can drop this down a little bit. But that is absolutely perfect where it is. It's really, really handy. 44 points into Staff Expert. We're doing light attacks all the time. We're doing our heavy attacks all the time on the front bar. We want to boost this as much as possible. 44 points in here and 18 in Master at Arms for the direct damage that you get from the lights and your other abilities as well. This is a really nice balance across the board with lots and lots of tests, and this is the highest it's come to so far. 75 points into Thermitage, increasing all of our damage over time, which we have a lot of, and of course our heavy attack is part of that as well, meaning of course we get our bonus for that, but we've opened up the 75 point bonus here as well, meaning when the target is off balance, For 5 seconds once every 20, our damage is increased by 10% across the board. Not just a 70% increase to the heavy attack, which does splash nearby targets as well, but to all damage. Now, I'm going to show you a quick target dummy kill with this particular setup. This is with Ether and Undaunted Infiltrator, Groftar, and of course the Maelstrom weapon. This is with Major Breach applied and nothing else. So when it comes to the Turok's Pact setup, it's actually about 1k under, so it's very, very close. So the choice is yours. Anyway, here we go. So hopefully that helped, hopefully that wasn't too boring, hopefully now I have a better understanding of how to approach this particular build. It is fairly easy to acquire in terms of loot and gear and all the rest of it, especially if you're using the non-trial version of it, so you can get kind of stuck in straight away. If you are scared of doing trials or you think that people won't let you in, just look for those pickup groups inside local areas. I guarantee you'll get in them just as quick as anybody else by raising your hand. Don't worry, get stuck in. Anyway, first of all, thank you all very, very much for watching. Hopefully this was helpful, and if you are not subscribing already, please do hit that button. It is free. Also, don't forget there are some links in the info section if you want to help support outside the channel for Patreon, Twitter, Facebook, and of course the website xynodegaming.com, along with a Twitch link as well, because I live stream on Twitch almost every night from 10 PM UK time onwards. Once again, thank you all very, very much for watching, and I will see you in the next video. Bye-bye.